Hello everyone, welcome to this series of videos where we're talking about the idea of operation strategy in a global environment. Right. So we talked about why globalization is important. Then we talked about how do companies come up with strategies, the idea of mission statements, strategies, and how companies come up with them, and how you translate a overall strategy to individual strategies to the operations management group or the design group or the manufacturing group and so on. So we talked a little bit about that. And then in the next video, we talked about the idea of how do you analyze operation strategies? Are operation strategies doing well? First of all, how do you come up with them? And then how do you analyze them? How do you make sure that they are working well? So we talked about that in the last video. And then in this final video, in this series of videos, we'll be talking about, well, outsourcing. Outsourcing obviously is something anybody who talks about globalization, the first thing that they say or first thing that they talk about is outsourcing. Now, outsourcing, the word itself means something that people, but people understand it very differently. If you hear the word outsourcing in the zeitgeist, it means something else. But let's talk about the technical definition of outsourcing. Right. So outsourcing is transferring activities that are traditionally been internal to external suppliers. So that's the basic idea, right? And this happens because you need increased technological expertise, you need better transportation, or you need rapid deployment or advancements in communications and computers, right? So what is outsourcing? So the best example that I'll give you of that is that there is a very famous flower company started by an entrepreneur. She started in San Francisco, and she was on Shark Tank, and she was given a very large offer by Mark Cuban, and she didn't accept it because Mark Cuban wanted 20% of a company and she was only willing to part with about 5% or something like that. So she didn't take the offer, but she's still around, still doing business. But basically her idea was that she comes up with these really beautiful flower arrangements, and many people, especially in the San Francisco area, wanted to buy these flower arrangements. So what they would do is they'd go look at the designs, they'd order them, and then early in the morning she'd go and she would have trucks that she within the company that would go and deliver these flowers to the different customers. Customers were very happy, and the company grew tremendously. But then the next step obviously was to move outside of San Francisco. Now the problem of moving outside of San Francisco is that then her job essentially became not about flower arrangements, but about managing a trucking company, right? Because now she has to deliver to customers, say, even if you're just talking about the Bay Area, not just outside, not just San Francisco, but just the Bay Area, that is a much bigger animal and much harder to do. So that is when she decided that, well, she would not be doing deliveries anymore, and she struck up a deal with FedEx to do the deliveries, right? And FedEx obviously is, their main business is trucking, their main business is deliveries, and so they are able to do it well. So that is an example of outsourcing. So outsourcing doesn't mean that part of the company has gone outside of the country, right? So outsourcing just means that part of a company has gone to a different company. You can outsource to a company in a different country, or you can outsource to a company within the same country. When you outsource part of your business to a company in a different country, that's not just outsourcing, that is offshoring. You can offshore part of your business, but keep it within the same company. For example, Microsoft has designers who has computer engineers not just in their Seattle offices, but they have offices in India, they have offices in China, they have offices in Vietnam, they have offices in Europe, right? So Microsoft is doing what it is doing. So it's building its software, it's building its services, it's building its cloud services and all of that. But part of that work is offshored, but it is not outsourced because it's still done by Microsoft, right? So offshoring and outsourcing, usually people tend to get them mixed up, but outsourcing just means that part of your company, it has been something that was being done within the company is not being done by a different company. That is all outsourcing means, right? Okay, so now that we have that point cleared up, so outsourcing manufacturing extends the long-standing practice of subcontracting production activities. So it's a very common sort of thing. Contract manufacturing is also another example. outsource. Here are some examples of DuPont routing legal services to Philippines. So the company that does legal services in Philippines, the people who do that actually come to the United States, get legal degrees, and they go back to the Philippines, and they are certified attorneys, right? So IBM handling travel services and payroll, and IBM does not handle travel service and payroll. They have outside companies do that. ADP managing payroll services for thousands of organizations. In fact, I think IBM uses ADP. Blue Cross sending its hip resurfacing surgery patients to India. So again, that's an example of outsourcing, right? So these are all examples of outsourcing. And the bottom idea is a theory of comparative advantage. So if an external provider can perform activities more productively than your firm, then the external provider should do that work. That's the idea of theory of comparative advantage, right? So so purchasing firm focuses on their core competence. So that way the entrepreneur was able to focus on her core competency, which was making beautiful flower arrangements, which is what her customers wanted, and did not have to spend time running a trucking company, right? That's the basic idea. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing, obviously. So advantages are obviously cost savings. You gain outside expertise. You're improving operations. You're likely getting better service. You're accessing outside technology, so software and other things that you might not have access to, or you might not know how to use. The outside company is able to do it. But you're also losing stuff by doing outsourcing, right? Logistics and inventory costs are definitely going to go up. If you do something yourself, it's definitely cheaper than to hire somebody else to do it, right? And then the biggest thing that two things that you lose are, one is loss of quality, loss of control. You cannot control when delivery happens. So it's not like if one of your drivers is sick, suddenly you could jump in a truck and go do the deliveries yourself on a particular day, right? Now that you cannot do if you're outsourcing into FedEx. And also, you might potentially lose part of your IP, and that is not as much of a problem to say as say a creative like the person making flower arrangements. But say that if you are outsourcing part of your manufacturing to a facility in China, or a facility in India, or a facility somewhere outside the country, there is a potential for your IP to be stolen, right? So that's potentially one thing that can happen. Now, if you are doing part of the work yourself and then you outsource this outside, then you're likely letting employees go, and that will have a negative impact on employees. And many of these risks might not manifest themselves for years. And by the time they manifest, it might be too late for you to be able to do anything, right? So that's one of the issues with outsourcing. So when you outsource part of your business, it's always important to come back to that part of business every so often to see, hey, if we stopped outsourcing and if we did it ourselves, would we be able to do a better job, right? Or should we change our outsourcing partner? Things like that, right? So how do you outsource, right? How do you rate outsourcing partners? A very common method is a factor rating method that is used. You assign points for each factor. First, you develop the factors on which you are going to rate outsourcing providers, and then you apply factors. So this is very similar to, say, when I'm grading an assignment for you, right? I create a rubric. So you create a rubric for rating outside producers. Here is an example. So factor rating method applied to national architects, potential IT sourcing providers, right? So you have one company in the United States, one company in India, and one company in Israel. And these are the different factors that you're looking at. Can reduce operational costs, can reduce capital investment, has skilled personnel, can improve quality, can gain access to technology not within the company, can create additional capacity, aligns with philosophy, culture, and of course, total weighted score, right? So you rate usually rating factors are between 1 and 5, right? So, and usually the higher the better. Say, for example, can reduce operating costs. So BIM was rated 3, SPC was rated 3, telco was rated at 5, right? Can reduce capital investment. BIM was rated at 4, SPC at 3, and telco at 5, telco at 3, right? So skilled personnel, definitely BIM seems to have the highest skilled personnel, right? Can improve quality. Looks like the Indian company has the highest potential for improving quality. Gaining access to technology. Both the Indian company and Israeli company have higher rating of technology and so on. So you multiply all of these things and then you give each of these a weight. Now, lots of times it's not easy to come up with these weights. You can say that, okay, reducing costs is more important to me than creating additional capacity. Maybe you say that it's twice as important to me or something like that. So you put them in order of importance for yourself and then you start assigning weights. Now, these weights don't have to add up to one initially. You can just assign numbers, but in the end, once you assign the weightage and relative weights are set up, then you can just add up all the weights and then divide each of the numbers by that, and then you come up with percentages, right? It's a simple way of doing that. So you calculate the percentage weights. You come up with these percentage weights and then you rate the different companies. Then whichever company rates the highest, you pick that company, right? So that's a simple way of doing that. So this is a factor rating method. It's a very common way of picking companies, right? Okay. All right. So like I said, reshoring, nearshoring, and friendshoring are three other things that people talk about. Reshoring is returning production back to the home country. So you were producing something somewhere else, but you bring it back to the home company. 2/3 of US and European manufacturing plans to repatriate Asian production. 20 of them might relocate most or all of their production back to the home country. Now, this was sort of accelerated a little bit by COVID, because COVID taught us that if you're not very responsive, if you do not have manufacturing locally, then ships cannot move for a certain period of time. And suddenly basics are not there anymore, and there's no toilet paper on shelves, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So nearshoring is another example where you might not move it right back to the home country, but much closer to the home country so that transportation costs get reduced. And of course, friendshoring, right? So friendshoring is you're located your a factory in a certain country. The milieu in the country might not be friendly to the home country where your company is. So you might say, hey, we will move it to a different country, but where the relationship between that country and the home country is better, right? So friendshoring. So that's the idea there. Okay. So I was going to continue and talk about the international operations strategy and all of that. So you know what? Let me finish that. Otherwise, the last video will be very short. So let's quickly talk about international operations strategies, right? So there are different types of ways in which you can go global, like I was talking about in my very first video, right? So you can have an international strategy. So an international strategy, and we will rate each of these strategies on two different dimensions. One is the responsiveness dimension. Do you have low responsiveness or do you have high responsiveness, versus the cost dimension. Are you going to have high cost or low cost, right? So cost reduction dimension, right? So you can have an international strategy where you have import-export licensing of products. So all you're doing is you're making everything locally, but you're selling everything internationally. So that's called an international strategy. Then you can have a globalized strategy where you have a very standard sort of product, and you have economies of scale, and you're building products in different companies and you're selling them in different locations. A good example of this is Texas Instruments, Caterpillar, and Otis Elevator. Then you have multi-domestic strategy where you have subsidiaries in different companies, franchising. So McDonald's is actually a very good example of this. When I talked about the veggie burger that you can get in India, you cannot get anywhere else. Even in other countries where they offer veggie burgers, say in the UK, the veggie burger in India is different from the veggie burger in the UK. So what McDonald's has is a multi-domestic strategy. Within each country, they have a different strategy, right? There's no single strategy for all the different countries. And finally, transnational strategy. This is the most sort of flexible strategy where you are making your materials in many different companies and you're selling all over the world. Coca-Cola, Nestle, a lot of these really large multinational companies, they have transnational strategies where not only are they making their products all over the world, they're selling the products all over the world, and they have stores and locations all over the world, right? So that's a transnational strategy. But if you look at them on the different dimensions, you will see that an international strategy has low local responsiveness, but is also low on cost reduction, right? So because you're making everything locally and you're selling all over the world, the problem is that if you suddenly need to send extra material somewhere or halfway across the world, you cannot have a lot of responsiveness, right? But multi-domestic strategy might have won't have a lot of cost reduction, but you'll have a lot of flexibility because each different country you have a different strategy. So as long as you are responsive within that particular region, you have because you have a multi-domestic strategy, you are able to be responsive in those different regions, right? Now, a global strategy, now this has very high cost reduction but low responsiveness. That's because your product is standardized, so you cannot be very responsive and change your product to meet customer needs. But your strategy is very global, so you are able to reduce costs because you're able to meet your customer where they are, right? And finally, transnational strategy will have both high cost reduction and high responsiveness. So this is where you're making your products all over the world and you're selling them all over the world, right? So that's a transnational product. All right. So this is the longest video that I've made, and I've steadily made longer and longer videos, and I'm sorry about that. I will try to keep them to 10 minutes next time around. But this is the idea. So I'm going to end this here. So this is the idea of outsourcing and the idea of the different types of international operation strategies that you can have, right? Next week, we'll talk about project management and how project management is a very vital part of operations management. But this week's topic, the topic for these series of videos was global operations management, right? Well, I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. And if you have, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.